an original.
From Story Studio Network.
I'm Dave Trafford, and this is the 2030 Project. The 2030 Project is a Story Studio Network podcast sponsored by Daily Bread Food Bank, a Toronto-based charity whose mission is to collaborate with all to eliminate food insecurity and advocate for solutions to end poverty. After 3 years of consultations, legislative crafting, committee reviews, and political pushing and pulling in the House of Commons and in the Senate in Ottawa, the Canada Disability Benefit Act finally received royal assent on June the 21st, 2023. It's intended to raise those living with disabilities in Canada out of poverty. Can it? Will it? In this episode, we are pleased and honored to meet one of the leading voices behind the Canada Disability Benefit Act.
Hello, my name is Chantal Petitclerc. I am a senator, a Paralympic medalist, and a person living with a disability.
Senator, you bring a unique, I won't say unique because there are others who have this, but a very specific lens to this conversation around the Disability Benefit Act. And I got to tell you, when the team here told me that we were going to interview you, my first thought was, this is going to be embarrassing, but my first thought was to gush because I know you as an athlete. I know you as an Olympian, and I cheered for you. I was, just proud to see you wave the Canadian flag and the medals and everything. And now I find myself in a funny place because now you're a parliamentarian. And I don't always have that same kind of gushing feeling about parliamentarians. So I'm in a funny place here. But I think it's important to it illustrates that I'm out of my comfort zone when I talk to you. And I think that's important in this conversation, that we need to take Canadians a little bit out of their comfort zone to have a proper, productive conversation about disability and the disability benefit.
That is so true. I want to say that when I was first introduced to the need of a Canadian disability benefit, I too was clearly out of my comfort zone, because I realized, and I've realized that it's been 7 years now that I've been appointed to the Senate of Canada, and it has brought me light to what it really is to live with a disability in Canada, which may seem a little funny because I've lived with a disability since an accident I had at the age of 13. But even if I lived with a disability, I had my disability experience from a place of privilege, really, because, very quickly I became a Paralympian and an athlete, which really made me, very strong, very independent in my wheelchair. My disability is, relatively light in terms of what it brings to me in terms of limits. I'm still very independent. I am super independent. And because of the medals, everybody see me as an achiever. So I never really had even the stigma in the eyes of people looking at me because they knew me. I was a bit of a public figure. So when I arrived in the Senate, it came, and I'm very humbled in saying that it came to me as a shock how much still needs to be done when it comes to persons living with a disability. How much needs to be done in terms of basic physical, architectural access, and then also in terms of just being able to access school, work, services. And then I was shocked to realize how many persons with disability still struggle economically, and how much needs to be done, and how little has been done, quite frankly.
Yeah, I've talked a great deal about this with our friends at the Daily Bread Food Bank in Toronto, and the number of people who come and use their service. An extraordinary percentage are those who live with disability of some form or fashion. It doesn't, maybe it prevents them from working, doesn't always, but the fact of the matter is there's an accessibility issue there on so many levels that they struggle with. But I look at you, I look at our recently departed and former Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, David Onley. We're about to celebrate Terry Fox Day here in Canada. Rick Hansen. The four of you are sort of this picture of resilience. You are those achievers. And I say this with all due respect. In some cases, you make it harder for those who live with a disability not to live with the stigma. Does that occur to you?
Not only it occurs to me, I've had some very strong disability advocate in Canada just bluntly telling me, you're not helping, because you're like those, you and Rick Hansen and others, and Terry, and you're like those like superheroes or with a disability, and I think we play a role, like we did play a role in raising awareness on persons with disability having more potential than limits. And I think that is still very relevant and important, and Paralympians do that. But now it's not only Paralympians, it's so many people in so many areas. But it's true that while I do believe that it's important to recognize those who are successful with a disability, it's also very important to recognize that for too many, the barriers are so important that they cannot have fully access to their potential. They cannot do whatever it is that they want to do. And to me, it's like this, it's like this system where you don't have physical access, so maybe you don't go to school, you don't have the services, so maybe you're not healthy enough to do the work that you would want to do. And the fact is, we live in a time, like, it's so privileged, because we live at a time when a lot of the very good jobs don't require so much physical strength anymore. You think about computers and like AI and all of that, and so many of these things could be accessible to persons with a somewhat severe disability, and yet the barriers remain, and too many of these people with huge potential still find themselves struggling economically, just struggling to survive. And my thought is that this is a challenge that needs to be tackled from all different angles and from all different levels. The Canada Disability Benefit will help, like it will be major, but it's not, it's not going to fix everything. It's not going to fix that if I go after school with my son in the playground here in Quebec, well, that playground is not wheelchair friendly. It's not for me as a parent. It's not for a kid with a disability. And that has, that's not something that the Canadian Disability Benefit will fix. So it will need to be everybody working together. And the way I see it, and I'm happy that the perspective is changing, because I think there was a time when Canadians and policymaker and stakeholders would think, oh, we need to help them. We need to help them because it's the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do. And it's true. I mean, I'm not saying it's not correct, but I like the change in tone when we now say, it's not about being nice. It's about individual having rights. And I would argue it's about investment. It's about investing, and it will pay back. The more
well, there's a cost to poverty. There is a cost to poverty that we cannot possibly afford. I mean, you and your colleagues in Ottawa will look at budget bills and all kind of bottom line, this, that, and the other thing. And when you look at reporting here in Ontario, poverty costs $33 billion a year in this province alone. And I asked the question, how can we possibly afford that? So I love that you put an ROI on this. That's important. Let's get into a little bit about the details, because this is a framework. There's still, regulatory meat to be laid on the bone here. And the advocates that I've heard from are happy it's finally here. They're a little skeptical, some more worried than others, about where this is going to go. For example, criteria is going to be an issue. How do we access it? Is it adequate? Those are kind of the three foundational areas where there are lots of questions. And it's easy to sort of stand back and say, don't worry, it'll soon come. They've waited a long time. And in some cases, to your point, this is very much a hand-to-mouth circumstance for so many people. Where do you see your role and your insight being able to accelerate and actually pinpoint some of those key issues in terms of alleviating the worries, but also making sure we don't have to get it right the first time, but let's get a good start?
I want to say that I'm very proud of the work that the Senate has done in strengthening this bill and in listening to the stakeholders and organization. And it was a very, very challenging time, because there was this balance of finally we're almost to that finish line. Let's move it, and let's move it fast, and let's vote on it, and this. And so we had some pressure on that. And then we also had organizations saying, well, it's not strong enough. We need to make sure that the poverty line is not going to be the standard, and that the living cost, the extra cost of living with a disability, will be also considered. And that is a direct amendment from the Senate. And this, I think, we heard about it so many times, like living with a disability is expensive. It's more expensive. And so this, I'm glad it's in the bill, even if the bill is a framework bill, as you said. And then one of the things that I think was very important, and time after time after time put on the record with commitment from Minister Qualtrough at the time, is that the organization, the stakeholders, they don't want to be consulted. They want to be co-creating the standards and the criteria. And this was articulated many times. It's in the bill, and it was on the record, and the minister agreed with that on the record as well. So this gives me confidence that the role that the lived experience stakeholders and organization representing all different types of disabilities and groups, they will be at the table, and they will be there to do proper, important work. I hope I'm right. I mean, there's always framework legislation. There's always some uncertainty. It's the nature of those legislation that so much is left out of it, right?
But it's an important part, because then it's organic. I mean, it's something that's able to respond and grow with the needs. And, you point out AI, that changes certain job opportunities. So I think that's a positive there. But, the new minister, Cara, is going to be joining us on the podcast. And I'd be curious, from your perspective again, and that view from the Senate, what do you think? Where does her I need to be on this bill?
I will say, if I were to have this conversation with the minister and talk about my hope and my experience from studying this bill and waiting for this bill for so long, is a few things. Is first, it has to be quick. Persons with disabilities and Canadians with disabilities have waited too long. They have suffered disproportionately during COVID. They are still disproportionately economically struggling. And so it has to be quick. And I know that, this government has shown us that when they choose to unblock money quickly, they can do it. So it can go fast. And Minister Qualtrough said at the time, that she thinks she can deliver it during 2024. And I do hope that this commitment will remain. So that's one thing. The other thing is that for it to work and for it to be the best that it can be, stakeholders organization needs to be at the table as co-creator. It can't be that they will be consulted and then we can put it on a paper. That's not enough. Like, for it to be, because the community of persons with disability is so unique and diverse and many voices. No one can speak for everybody. For the 23% of persons with disability, it's not going to work. So it has to be that we bring everybody to the table. That's very important. And then I will say, and this is the one amendment from the Senate that was not kept by the government, is the one on clawbacks. Mm-hmm. Clawbacks are a real worry for myself and for many. I understand, and I did support the message respectfully rejecting that amendment. I supported that. I understand the complexity and the negotiations with every provinces and programs, but I see the how huge this is going to be a task to do it, but it is my fear. It is my fear that there will be clawback if it's not done right, and if there's no mechanism, and so this would be let's get to that because this is so crucial. But the main thing is individuals, they need to have a commitment that they will receive a check by the end of 2024.
Yeah, that whole nothing about us without us, just the whole idea of not telling me what I need to be part of saying what needs to be done, is a really interesting part of this, because I've looked and so far I can't find another jurisdiction that has developed this kind of framework policy with that approach. So as scary as it might be, it may well be something that, Canadians become known for, because we can break ground here. We can show the world that this is what we need to do to support those living with disability, to make sure that it's good for all of us. It makes sense for our economy. It makes sense for our kids. It makes sense for our, as we age, we're all going to have various experiences with, disability, depending on how we frame that conversation. So from that perspective, I think there's a real hopeful part to it. But, again, you're right. The devil is in the detail here.
And I think you're so right. And I think it could be a groundbreaking approach on always having the concerned Canadian at the center of the decision process and at every step of it. And in decision making, capacities. I think that would be ideal. I mean, is it easier? Of course, it's not easier. The more stakeholders, the more ideas, the more negotiations. But
gets a little noisy.
Yeah. It can be chaotic. It can be frustrating. But investing in that work at the beginning stage, at the conception and at the building of something, I think in the end, it prevents, and I've seen it many times, I've been in the Senate 7 years, where, down the road, it's like, well, this program did not take this and this and this into consideration. And then you think, well, if the right people had been at the table from the beginning, we would have prevented that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a great opportunity here.
Senator, I know you're busy, but it's great to have your insight, your passion on this. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.
The 2030 Project is a Story Studio Network podcast that we are proud to produce. It is sponsored by Daily Bread Food Bank. If you'd like to help eliminate poverty, start by sharing this podcast with your federal MP, your member of provincial parliament, your local municipal representatives, anyone you think needs to hear this message about the Canada Disability Benefit. And to learn more, visit dailybread.ca. Mike Trutler is our technical producer and audio editor here at Story Studio Network, and the 2030 Project is produced by the team at Daily Bread Food Bank. I'm Dave Trafford. Thanks for listening.